Court is now in session.
All rise. This is Order in the Court, an inside look into college basketball on the West Coast with veteran announcer Ted Robinson and the Pac-12's all-time leading scorer Don MacLean. So please be seated. Order in the Court. Here now are Ted and Don.
And welcome everybody back to Order in the Court, our last February edition, which means we're starting to get to the real serious part of the basketball season, Don. Everyone talking about net rankings and seedings and bubbles and all that stuff. And there's another little milestone that we're going to commemorate on this edition. Oregon State won its 20th game this past week in the regular season. And I was blown away when I went back to look. And of course, it was reported by Oregon State that they had not done that in a regular season since 1990. They had done it a couple of times using postseason play, including Wayne's great run to the Elite Eight a couple of years ago, but not in the regular season since Gary Payton was playing.
What it means now, it obviously doesn't mean as much as it used to with the net rankings that you mentioned and all these other metrics that the committee and everyone else uses to try and understand who's going to be in the NCAA tournament. It used to be if you were in a major conference and got to 20, you were probably in. It's really not the case anymore. Being in the Big Ten this year for me, how many teams that are under 500 in the conference with net rankings in the 20s and 30s that are going to be in the NCAA tournament. So, 20 wins is different. But you know what? And we're going to talk to him later. But like Wayne, he's a tough dude. And all this stuff that has gone on that you and I have covered with the Pac-12 and how Oregon State and Washington State were left. But they fought through it, and they're building it back. And in another year and a half or whatever year, the Pac-12 is going to be back. And Wayne has had to deal with that. And you can't underestimate, Ted, when recruiting, saying that you're no longer in the Pac-12, at least not for now. You're in the WCC. And so he has stayed with it. He stayed the course. This is the best team he's had in a couple of years. And so, I'm not surprised that this team got to 20 wins.
Yeah. It's funny. We've talked over our Order episodes this year about some of the new players and the impact they've had. We'll talk with Wayne about Michael Ratai, his incredible jump this year. There's a number that I was always taught, and it's an old school thing in this new analytic era. You don't hear it much. But I looked at Oregon State's stats just before we started, and they have made almost the same number of free throws as their opponents have attempted this year. And I was always taught going way back that was a stat that coaches looked at because it determines, do we get the ball inside? Are we physical? Do you find even in this era, is that a valid stat to look at?
I do, because that's part of the offense. And if you're a really balanced offensive team, that means you're a capable three-point shooting team. If you get to the line, it means that you're attacking the paint, that you're not settling, that you're trying to get in there, whether it's on post-up entries or guys beating the initial defender, getting 2 feet in the paint and then making plays. But certainly the way Wayne has coached forever, he's always wanted to have an inside-out presence and being able to throw it in there and that guy either make a play or the double team comes and you put the defense in rotation and you get open threes. And so that's always been a priority for Wayne. He hasn't always had it, or at least not as good as some years. But I think this year when you watch Oregon State, they're a pretty balanced offensive team. You mentioned Ratai. He's made a jump, but they have a lot of capable guys, and they have capable three-point shooting. They have an interior presence. They have a guy in Ratai that can do both, that can go inside and out. So I'm not sure, Ted, if that stat is as prevalent as it used to be because teams are shooting way more threes.
Right.
But I still think if you have that stat, it's certainly not a bad thing. That's for sure.
Right. And if you hit it, that's exactly why I asked the question, because you get teams, for example, in the WCC, Santa Clara has had success this year being more in the NBA style right now of shooting more threes than twos. And it's funny because another guy that we have touched on this year, but it continues to be surprising to me, that Parsifala, who height-wise gives away a little bit to a lot of other opposing players, and that guy's pretty good inside.
He is. He knows how to use his body. He understands angles. You can tell he's been coached down there. I think with Ratai being the leading scorer, I think they prioritize him a little more when he gets a mismatch. But again, the way Wayne likes to play, and he hasn't always been able to play that way, he has somebody in Fala that he can trust if he throws it in there, good things are probably going to happen.
Yeah. And of course, this coming week for Oregon State is going to be big. They have a chance to climb a little higher. They have 2 tough games. They have a home game against San Francisco, and then they finish up at Moraga at St. Mary. It's a perfect lead into the job that Wayne Tinkle has been able to do at Oregon State this year. And look, it's been a tough road the last couple of years for Wayne. He's had to churn his roster over a few times. This year, the churn has worked. And Oregon State, this past week, winning its 20th game in the regular season for the first time since 1990. Well, it is a pleasure to welcome Wayne Tinkle to Order in the Court. Wayne, 20, it still feels like a magic number, doesn't it, in college basketball?
No, it certainly does. I think over the years it's changed a little, but 20 wins, and especially for us, you guys are well aware what we've been through the last few years. But adding 9 new players, getting to 20 wins is certainly a great mark. But it's funny, as soon as we wrote it up on the board, the guys are like, "Okay, now we got to add to it." So quickly shifting their mindset to what's next. I love it.
Wayne, unfortunately, I've only had a couple of your games this year, but when I dug into it and watched film and then watched those 2 games when calling it, it feels like there's a different spirit and a different energy to this team than there's been the last couple of years. And I guess what I'm curious about, we all know about the run you made in 2021. You ripped through the Pac-12 tournament, you win that, and then you get to the Elite Eight. I guess what I'm curious about, is there any synergy or similarities between this team and that team to make you think that, hey, we could do that again with this team?
Well, yeah, I mean, that team obviously was special. It didn't necessarily come out of nowhere. We finished the regular season with 3 consecutive road wins at Cal, at Stanford, at Utah. And it was almost like, okay, everything the coaching staff has been telling us all year long, even through the tough losses, getting to this point, it kind of just reaffirmed everything that we had been saying. If they did it, it would lead to success. And remember that year there was a lot of trial tribulations with no fans, COVID, and we really learned how to deal with adversity that year, and kind of laughed our way, not with the opponents, but when we won the tournament in Vegas, some stuff was thrown at us, and we're like, gosh, we've been dealing with this all year. First round against Tennessee, they had to hold us, both teams, in a little side court that the Indiana Fury used for practice. And our guys are like, we're built for this. The difference with this team, there hasn't been that amount of adversity, but there's a quiet confidence that we've seen kind of build over the last couple of weeks, through a tough loss at Portland. We didn't play well at Gonzaga, but man, that was special. So are they capable? I think we maybe have more overall talent and maturity with this group. But certainly the one thing that's kind of inhibited us here of late, we've got to get to where we lock down defensively. And that team, if you guys recall, we were either first or second in both defensive field goal percentage and 3-point field goal percentage in that NCAA tournament behind Baylor, who ultimately won it. So if we want to give ourselves a chance, we got to get back to guarding how we were earlier in the year.
Hey, Wayne, early in the season, I had a chance to see you play the Oregon game. And I remember afterwards, it was a tough loss, for a close loss. But I said, that's your team. That's your kind of team. So now here we sit heading into March. Talk about that. Did you feel like in this period where everybody's churning and you churned your roster as well, that you put together a team that fits you and your identity?
Yes, that's really good point. Much closer. I mean, we're a physical team. We've had moments where we've really, guarded well. Offensively, the in-out balance, I think, is maybe as good as we've had here at Oregon State. We've got guys that can score it at the rim. We shoot a good percentage from 3. Our offensive efficiency numbers are up there. And that's when, our type teams are going to guard you, solid rebounding team. And then offensively, we're going to pound it at you, get to the free throw line, and shoot a good percentage from 3. So I think, and I said that to some of my really close friends because they really know my mannerisms and my looks on the sideline. And they're like, you're back to really believing in these guys. We can tell it's your type of team. And, with that being said, we've added maturity So we've got some older guys, some young guys, some guys in the middle. We're a little more athletic. We're had been guarding better. All those things kind of rolled up into one. Certainly feels like it's we've got the kind of group, and really we feel like it's year one in a rebuild. Now we got to retain these guys moving forward. But we talked early this year about really building momentum this year and next for when we rebuild the pack. We feel like this team has even put us maybe a little bit ahead of pace as far as that's concerned.
Wayne, this era, the portal, and I hate to bring it up because you weren't able to keep him, but 2 years ago, Tyler Bilodeau really made a jump, like a noticeable jump between his freshman and sophomore year. The reason I'm bringing that up is Ratai has made a gigantic jump between sophomore and junior year, and I just think it's interesting that they're both, similar positions, similar guys. Like, what's been the formula with guys like that for each of those guys to make such a big jump from one year to the next?
Well, I'll tell you, and it's what we suffered through. They got a ton of experience as freshmen and sophomores, ton of experience, and they were allowed to play through mistakes. And there's really no substitute. Obviously we coached them hard, we developed them, but we allowed them to play. And Mike's big switch this year, I think he's played the bulk of his minutes at the power forward spot, where Tyler played last year. When we played them together, it was at the 4 and 5 last year. But Mike's put in a lot of work. He's shown incredible loyalty. It took him a little while to really kind of buy into this new group we put around him because he had been through so much with all those other freshmen we brought in 3 years ago. And so we give Mike a lot of credit. And he had a bad weekend. I got after him pretty good. I know he was upset. And so we had a couple really good meetings last week. Just, hey, you got to let me coach you hard. All the responsibilities we give you. We give you a lot of leash. And he felt down because he didn't perform. And then he couldn't get out of bed for a couple of days, had a really bad flu, and really good text exchange. Like, Coach, appreciate you pushing me. I know I hate missing practice. I want to be out there. I'm not playing my best. And we just said, Mike, you need to just eliminate all the noise. Eliminate the noise. Listen to my voice. Keep working hard because we believe in you. And, he had a really good weekend, obviously. But the big thing's going to be making sure that he's number one. We got to take care of him. We've made that very clear with our people on campus and the collective. I know there's going to be people trying to pursue him, but he's a loyal kid. He's going to be very transparent if people are trying to reach out. And we've just got to make sure that he's another one that doesn't get away because he's an awful big piece of what we've done this year and what we plan on doing next year.
You know what, Wayne? It's interesting you bring up the loyalty part, and I've had a few conversations this year. The grass may not always be greener, and I get it. This is about money, and you want to take care of your family and all that stuff. But there's a lot of examples now that we're in the thick of this portal era of guys going for the money, going somewhere else, and it really not working out. And so I'm just wondering, is that part of the conversation now too with these guys?
No, certainly. It certainly is. And, the other thing is like earning potential. Somebody like Mike is going to have a chance to earn good money as a pro, wherever that may be. Where some others, maybe college is it. And so you're like, hey, if you can go triple your money for your last year or two, go at it because you're probably not going to make much after that. But it certainly has to become part of the conversation. The other thing is because we've seen players that have left for more money and not have near the seasons that they just finished at the prior school. Are they going to allow you the same freedom, or is it the similar type system? Are they going to let you play through mistakes, put the ball in your hands? Those are big decisions too, because if you're a guy that's kind of on the bubble, if the NBA is talking about you or high-level European teams as a junior, and then you go somewhere else and your numbers drop, well, they're on to the next guy. And so all those things have to figure in a little bit. And it's funny you brought that up because that's a reason why we went really big on international players, because of the club system, mostly in Europe, where they're typically with those clubs from an early age until they decide what they're going to do, college or pro. And we're banking on that a little bit. Now it's going to become a battle because whenever money's involved and third parties, it's difficult. But we're hoping that we can keep the bulk of this group together, add to it, and keep building this thing.
Hey, Wayne. Again, Ty was the returning player that stepped forward, but two new guys you added this year. Give us your coach capsule on what it's meant to have Minor as a point guard for you, and Parsifalo, who, despite he's giving away some size to some of the big guys he plays against, pretty damn good inside.
Yeah, no, you talk about maturity and toughness. I think those two are the ones that really set the pace there this summer into the fall and then throughout the year. DeMarco, just hard-nosed, tough point guard. He plays both ends of the floor. We hadn't had a guy at that position do that for a number of years. And then he's a good playmaker. He's a good pressure release guy because he's hard to trap in the backcourt. He can get through it. Great free throw shooter. So late game, you can have the ball in his hands. But really, his just every day, his voice, his effort has really helped set the tone for us. And then Parsa just being a physical presence. I mean, we want him to fight the touch a little bit more in the post, but it's hard for bigger guys to even get through him because he's a solid 260. We kind of joked. We're like, man, it'd be great if he was 6'11", 7 feet. And somebody said, yeah, but he probably wouldn't be here then. And then offensively, shooting close to 60%. He's been a little bit tired of late and missed some at the rim, but just we haven't had a guy that could duck and seal like that in a number of years. Like, it reminds me a lot of my Montana centers that got really good at ducking and sealing. You throw it to them, and there's a reason why your team's field goal percentage is close to 50 every year. So he's been – the great thing is they're great kids. They're fun to coach every day. There hasn't been a day where we walk off the practice court, thinking, oh, man, we got to come back and do this again tomorrow. And that sets the tone for some of the young guys. Like you've seen Munch and Logie kind of get a little bit more here of late because they've learned from some of those guys. Josiah Lake's gotten better and better throughout the year from going head-to-head with DeMarco. So you always hear the iron sharpens iron, and it's great to see that those guys have set the tone for us, and we got guys, getting better as we get closer to the stretch run here.
I know you got a couple left, Wayne, but I wanted your thoughts on the format of the WCC tournament. It looks like you guys can't be any worse than a 5 seed right now, but how important would it be to move up a spot and get into that top 4 so you get that extra bye?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's something obviously we can shoot for. This weekend's going to tell a lot because we can even move up a couple of spots. I can't wrap my mind around the format, the bracket, and all that works, but I know the higher seed you have the better off you're going to be with maybe getting a game or two rest. But you also can look at it the other side. I know it doesn't happen a ton, but it happened in the Pac-12 where those there's been teams that get on a roll early. I know offhand Colorado and Oregon I think come to mind, and they carry that momentum all the way to a championship. And sometimes teams that are sitting and watching come out a little rusty. So we'll make sure that we play it the right way, whatever seed we get, and sell it to our guys and make sure they're ready.
Well, I think a Wayne Tinkle Oregon State team did it 4 straight days, right?
Well, we did 3. We got a bye in the first round because we got the 4 seed when Arizona had to miss out on that tournament.
That's right. Yeah. Well, Wayne, as we finish this, one last moment. It's not basketball, but it's about what college basketball means. When you beat Gonzaga at Gill before a sellout crowd, just give us. It's a month ago now, but when I say that, what emotions and feelings run through you?
Well, it was unbelievable, and I tell you, I got a little emotional. I normally do during the national anthem, but we saw that place packed. You guys are aware of my connection to Gonzaga. My dad being former dean of students, that's when we moved out from Chicago. Obviously, my daughter played there. Close relationship with Coach Few and his staff over the years. It was emotional, and then to have our guys perform, almost let it slip away. I mean, it was almost apropos of the way that we had the game in control. We let it slip. They tie it up, and then we go to overtime and pull it out. I thought added to the theater and the drama a little bit, but the celebration with our guys in the locker room, well, with our fans initially, I always tend to just get out of there, let the players celebrate with the fans and get out of the way. But we had some fun in the locker room, and it was just a real shot in the arm for everything we've kind of gone through, the fact that we've kind of stuck to who we are, what we stand for. And it was a big win against an incredible program. And unfortunately, as emotionally high as that was, we had to go to San Francisco 2 days later, and it was great of you to show up to shoot around, and we didn't perform, but that was a special night. And we still get some emails from folks talking about how they watched that game from across the country and how proud it made them, talking about Beaver Nation. And so we hope to where those games are, become normal here at Gill again, to where we're winning those big games, and not having it be such a surprise, but special moment, something that we'll continue to build with.
Well, Wayne, thank you for joining Don and myself to do this. And listen, this is a memorable thing. 20 wins when you put it in perspective. The first time it's happened in Oregon State basketball in the regular season since 1990. And it allows me to give a tip to a great named Jim Anderson, who was the coach of that Beaver team. And exactly. And Jim was a wonderful presence in Oregon State basketball. But when you do something for the first time in 35 years, tip of the hat to you. Well done.
Well, I appreciate it, guys. It's great to be with you, and always fun working with you guys and visiting with you. And we appreciate you pulling for us, and hope to keep this thing rolling.
Great. Thanks,
Go
Wayne.
Beavs.
All right, Don. So for Washington State, unfortunately, the end of the season just hasn't, we've covered this, hasn't gone the way they would like. And the interesting part, they're going to have their senior night Thursday, their last home game against San Diego. And it's the guys that came with David Riley from Eastern Washington, the big guys, Dane Erickstrup and Ethan Price, are going to walk because they are out of eligibility. But I've also been told Cedric Coward is going to walk in senior night. And so that would be noteworthy, because that would have been, had he been willing to come back to Washington State next year, it would have been a big ad for David Riley. It's sort of bad. You think he has a professional possibility ahead of him. For the Cougs, it's going to mean more of a rebuild for David Riley.
Yeah, I do think Coward has a future in the NBA, but it's awfully hard coming off an injury and not playing. So I'll be interested to see what he does. It's hard to go into the draft, through the draft process, having not played the entire year. You just don't have any momentum behind you. I think if I had to guess, he'll probably come back, put together a good year, then probably raise his stock even from what it is right now. But what's interesting to me is David Riley kind of did what he thought he had to do, and that was bring guys that knew his system, knew his terminology from Eastern Washington. Unfortunately, the injury bug just got him. And so now it's basically starting over, because he's not going to bring, obviously, any more Eastern Washington guys in. So now the process starts of building the program. I think he had a good start. I think he raised some eyebrows early in the year, but again, the injuries got him. But it can be done. Kyle Smith did it. He slowly built up Washington State from where they were at and made it to the NCAA tournament. On David Riley to recruit, basically. I think the system he plays is attractive to a lot of players. The 5 out, a lot of scoring. And so we'll see. We'll see who he brings in and what it's going to look like next year. But it will be a lot different than what it was this year, having all that familiarity with the players he brought from Eastern Washington.
Okay, so as we wind down, we're going to have a soapbox moment and then Don's story time. So a quick soapbox moment. Big game Saturday night around the West, and it got a lot of attention nationally. It was BYU, Arizona. And you heard about two things that happened at the end of the game. One was, unfortunately, a bad call by a very good official that was the last call of the game, and unfortunately it wound up settling the outcome. And believe me, I'm not saying this. Tony Padilla is a very good ref. Just like good players miss shots, good coaches make mistakes, good officials miss calls. Tony missed a call. And of course, then the Arizona crowd reaction was covered. I want to talk about something that happened the play before the last play. Arizona's driving down a point, 25 seconds to go or so. Caleb Love drives to the basket, beats his man, goes in, lays the ball in. Foul is called on the floor. I went nuts. Yeah. He had beaten his man. He had started to gather, the basketball term that, Don, you know so well from the NBA. Mm-hmm. And they called the foul on the floor. You've penalized the offense when the guy won. The offensive player won. And we go back about 10 years ago, Don, in the Pac-12, when Ed Rush, a longtime NBA ref, came in to run officiating in the Pac-12. And he tried to incorporate the gather concept into the college game, and it kind of got brushed away. That drove me. It's a horrible rule. I understand the official was calling the way he's supposed to call it.
Yeah.
Horrible rule.
Well, first off, just like players feel the pressure in late game situations to make shots, make plays, officials do too. They do. The crowd into it. They understand the meaning of the game. Yes, good officials make mistakes just like players miss shots at the end of games. I agree with you. I think that rule, if you've made the play and you are starting to score, wherever that may be, off of one leg, off of two leg, if you are in the act of trying to score and you get fouled, the basket should count if you make it and you get the free throw. I don't think it should be called on the floor. That rule, I'm with you, Ted. That rule has never made sense to me.
No.
But sometimes you see it the other way. Like you'll see a guy get fouled in the same scenario, but be given the basket. And so it's a tough call, but yeah, I agree with you on that.
Yeah, it's just, again, it's just part of my thing, my soapbox to finish is just college seems to go overboard and try to say we're not the NBA. We're different than the NBA. And sometimes it just goes against common sense. And I can't stand the fact that defense gets rewarded for breaking the rules. That just bothers me. So you can tell I want every game to be 145 to 142. I'd be happy with that. All right, Don, let's tee it up and finish up with this week's Don Story Time.
Well, I think what's interesting, and obviously have a lot of stories. Some are made for TV, some aren't. But I think the most interesting ones, in this one, I'm going to finish this show and the next show with Michael Jordan, just because to me he's the greatest basketball player of all time, but the greatest competitor I've ever come across. And everybody knows the story. It was on The Last Dance a few years ago about the LaBradford Smith. I was on that Washington Bullets team with LaBradford Smith. And the reason I'm not retelling the story, because a lot of people know it, that LaBradford went in there and had 37 in Chicago Stadium. But worse than that, he said, "Good game, Mike," after the game. Not "Good game, Michael," not good. He said, "Good game, Mike." And so we heard before we left. So it was a back-to-back. It was in Chicago, then the next night was at our place. And we had heard before we even got on the plane that he was mad and told him, "Good game, Mike." So I always got to the arena early, Ted. So if it was, let's say it was a 7:00 game, I was always there by 4:30-ish. And so the next day, it's a back-to-back too. I get there at 4:30. Michael Jordan is finishing his workout, which is abnormal on game day. He did his work in the morning. Like he came on the road and was at the arena like 4 hours early. One of the security guards said he'd been there for an hour and a half. And I walked in because I was the first player there. And when guys started coming in, I'm like, "Guys, you better look out. Jordan's already ready to go." And his goal was to get the 37 in the first half to basically shut down the Bradford Smith. And he had, Ted, 36 in the first half of that game. Because how dare he come into Chicago Stadium, get 37, and then tell him, "Good game, Mike"? Are you kidding me? And so that stuff, the legendary bulletin board material that these guys use, all the great ones do, Larry Bird, Magic, Jordan, Kobe, all were just looking for any slight, and they were going to use it. And I couldn't believe it. I could not believe how much LaBradford, who was the nicest guy in the world too, by the way, and like him getting 37 could motivate Michael Jordan, who this was 1994, I believe. Mm-hmm. How that could motivate Michael Jordan so much to do what he did the next night blew my mind. Yeah. It's incredible.
Well, that's a great tease. And folks, that should get you prompted to be ready to watch our season finale of Order in the Court, to hear Don wrap it up with that great story. I'm anticipating. So, thank you. Thanks to Wayne Tinkle for being with us, and we'll be back next week for our final episode of Order in the Court.